Welcome to Central Georgia Focus. I'm your host today, Katelyn Heck. Today we're focusing on caregivers. November is National Family Caregivers Month and Alzheimer's Awareness Month. The Alzheimer's Association provides some data about the growing need for caregivers here in the U.S. Their latest study estimates 6.7 million Americans over the age of 65 are now living with Alzheimer's. The study projects that number to grow to nearly 13 million by 2050. That same study estimates that more than 11 million caregivers are providing unpaid care in the U.S., and that's just for people suffering with Alzheimer's. There are more age groups, illnesses, and situations where caregivers are needed. So joining us today to talk about caring for the caregiver, we have Ms. Cynthian Hartfield, lead chaplain for Piedmont Macon Medical, and Franchetta Trawick, grief counselor and chaplaincy coordinator for Piedmont Macon Medical. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Now, before we get into caring for the caregiver, let's talk a little bit about you two and your background and what you do at Piedmont.
I'm a chaplain for Piedmont, and primarily my job is to go and offer words of encouragement to the family as well as the patient, although sometimes the patients are maybe not aware that they're even in the world, but the family needs support. And so at Piedmont, we try to come and be that support that they need, maybe to hold their hand, to pray. A lot of times the families, they just need you to pray. And we come in and we do that. We sit with the families, we counsel with the families if they'd like to talk about anything. We try to be instrumental if it's an end of life situation, we try to allow time for each family member to come and say their goodbyes by themselves. We'll do a prayer together, but then we'll allow them to come and say whatever they need to say to that family member. And it seems to offer them some type of solace that we're able to do that, and it's a blessing to be able to do it, because some patients are really alone in the hospital, and it's very sad to see one who's at the end of their life and they have to die alone, notwithstanding about COVID when no one was allowed to actually come in. But now you expect family members to be there, and we're happy that we can provide that service.
That's some important work you all do. And what about you, Ms. Trawick? How long have you been in your role?
I've been in my role over 22 years. I serve as our grief counselor for our healthcare system. So I'm pretty much that person who is with families and patients during critical encounters, and of course helping them navigate when we're discussing issues about end of life. Also, I coordinate our chaplaincy program, which allows us to do a lot of patient advocacy work. One thing that I'm really proud of that Piedmont has incorporated in my role is not only being a grief counselor for our system, but also for our community, which allows us to have two grief support groups that's open for the community, free of charge. I do individual counseling sessions and also facilitate our caregiver support group. So those are special roles that are dear to me, and I am just really pleased that we are able to provide that to our community without any cost to them.
It's, again, very important work that you all are doing to help so many people. And we're talking about caregivers today. What exactly is a caregiver in today's world?
A caregiver is that person that comes in and provides whatever the patient has need of. Sometimes if it's a family situation, it's different if you're a paid caregiver and if it's a family situation. If it's a family situation, it's pretty much tag, you're it. You're going to do everything. You might be responsible for bathing, you might be responsible for the meals, you may be responsible for giving out the medications, just to be there to be with the family. Sometimes families are not able to afford someone to do everything. They may have a cook, but they don't have someone to come in and give a bath. Or they may have someone who can come in and do the bathing, but they can't afford someone to come and do the grocery shopping. So you are that person who comes in and provides whatever that person's need is. It's just what it says, you are the caregiver. You take care of whatever they need of. They stand in need of. And a lot of times it's very difficult if you are the only person in that family. I know Fran and I have both been caregivers for a number of years, and we were the only people that were coming in doing that unless we paid someone to do other things. But as far as family members, because the other children have moved away, and so we were here in Georgia, and it was for us. Now for Franchetta it was different because Franchetta was an only child. So her situation was a lot more different than mine because she was tag you're it and responsible for doing it all.
And talk about your experience as a caregiver.
Well, I was the primary caregiver for over 20 years for my now deceased parents and grandparents. And it was difficult. And a lot of times you have to have that reset button to say, okay, I've got to do these things to take care of me so I can take care of them. And the affirmation I would always say is that I've got to take care of them, but I've got to take care of me first so I can do that. And what I would do is I would make sure that being an only child, I would really verbalize when I needed help. And that's having a small support system. I didn't have a support group that I attended. That's why it's so important now that we have the support groups. But I did glean a lot of information from talking to other people, what suggestions, recommendations they may have. We did a lot of conversations together and helping each other on what we could do for our parents, even though it was different because I was an only child and it wasn't really a lot of support, but you can get so much information when you share, I do need help. What do I do in this situation? How can someone help me? What are the community resources? And putting all that together enabled me, along with my faith and God taking care of me, to be able to help them and see them through their journey. And for me to be pleased that I'd done a good job.
It's important that you do take care of yourself first, because you can't fill somebody else's cup if you're filling from an empty cup, right?
Absolutely.
Now, talking about caregivers, are you seeing an age range of caregivers now? Is that changing over the years?
Somewhat so. I think when you're just living your life, you never really think about at some point in time that you're going to have to be that person that takes care of your parents. In the back of your head maybe, but when it really hits home, it just took me back. I mean, I was shaken because what do I do? How do I do it? And I had two parents at the same time. They were both aging. One had an aneurysm that left her impaired. The other one had cancer that had been gone undiagnosed for a long time. And so I was fortunate to get a doctor that would allow me to bring both of them in at the same time. Had to pay 2 visits, but at least they would allow me to bring them together, or else I was struggling trying to find one person to stay at home with them. But that was interesting, trying to bring both of them at the same time. But I'm noticing that as a chaplain, you see more and more young people that need caregivers, from whether it's health issues, drug issues, but they need someone to take care of them. And if your parents are still working, or there are no siblings, there are no facilities that you qualify for, what do you do? So I see a lot of young people that are and it's so sad because you think they've got their whole lives, and what do they have to look forward to? When you're older, you love them still, but you say they've had a good life, you know, and you're moving on, and this is just the end of that journey. But for young people, I see more and more young people that are really needing help, that are needing caregivers. And actually sometimes a caregiver needs a caregiver, for someone to just talk to them and help them realize, no, you're not losing it. And yes, it's valid for you to have these feelings, and it's okay to feel that way. And as long as you know that it's a problem, then talk to somebody. If you need help, ask for help. People they think you're managing it. They'll look at Franchetta and think she was doing a great job, but they wouldn't know about the times that she'd break down and think, what am I gonna do? Or they wouldn't look at me and say, oh, you're having to take care of both your parents. One of them can't walk. But they don't know if you don't ask them. If you don't ask for help, then you don't get help. So you get what you ask for. If you ask for help, someone, if they can't help you themselves, maybe there'll be a referral and put you on the right page. So networking is important when you're a caregiver.
I could definitely see that being such an important thing. Has COVID-19 and the pandemic changed the landscaping of being a caregiver?
I think so, because it was a public health issue for all of us. And what it did is it was an overwhelming burden, not only on the caregiver, but the care recipient, because also you're dealing with the physical symptoms, isolation, because a lot of times you could not be able to get someone else to come into your home, or even you know, take care of that person as when they were in the hospital because of guidelines. So I think it made an additional burden on both the caregiver and the care recipient. And also what it did is it's just kind of overwhelming of their several issues when you're dealing with someone that has had COVID and it's been long-term and they had to be hospitalized. So you've got a lot of physical and a lot of emotional stress that again is not only for the caregiver but the care recipient as well. So that did kind of change the spectrum of how we deal with caregiving because of that, that epidemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so many things, and it's even touched that aspect as well. Well, I know we have a lot more questions for you, a lot more we want to get into, specifically talking about Alzheimer's and dementia patients as well. So we'll be right back with Central Georgia Focus. Welcome back to Central Georgia Focus. Today we're talking caregivers and how more families are caring for loved ones today, the stress and the support available. Our guests are Cynthian Hartfield and Franchetta Trawick from Piedmont Medical. Thank you again both for being with us today. More Americans are caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. What kind of toll does that take on the caregiver, and why are we seeing more of these caregivers?
I don't know if it's the food or what, but I know that it's a necessity. In addition to taking care, being the caregiver for my godparents at the same time, then my father was diagnosed with dementia. And the worst part about that was trying to get the medication to where it needed to be. I remember him getting lost one day, but he was at his favorite place he liked to go eat, and they called and said, you need to come and get him. He didn't even know how we got there, so at that point we had to make the decision, take the keys. Couldn't drive anymore, and he just couldn't understand why he couldn't drive, but he also knew that he couldn't get back home. So then we put him on medication, and the medication has sometimes some very adverse side effects. Just bad side effects. It would help maybe with his mental acuity, but it also gave him explosive diarrhea. So you have to decide, what did I deal with? And I decided for me, it was better for me to do, because he was, even though he had dementia, he was so sweet, just, and my dad's never been sweet, but that medication really helped him. So I said, I can do that more than I can the explosive diarrhea. He'd eat and there was just no controlling it, nothing he could do about it. I remember going over one evening and just stopping in the middle of the road, putting my head down saying, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing by not giving him this medication, but he seems happier. And I just put my head down and said, Lord, I don't know if I can take this. How much longer can I deal with it? And just went home, didn't think about it, got up the next morning to take him his breakfast. And I always walked in and say, good morning, Daddy. He was military and he would say, good morning. That morning he didn't say anything. So I said, Sugar, are you mad at me? Why are you not talking to me? And I said, put your breakfast in the kitchen. And I went back there and he was laying across the bed and just looking up in the ceiling. And I said, well, are you mad at me? You're not talking to me? And my father was deceased. And I felt so bad because the day before when I left, I said, I don't think I can take this much longer. And I was guilt-ridden about that, because it was just a lot. I'd taken care of my other parents and I was having to take care of him, and it was just a lot. So I think caregivers have to really find someone that they can talk to, take time for themselves, because it will beat you up if you allow it to. I know it did for me. It was just really hard. And I was just so surprised and touching him and finding out that, you know, he had expired sometime, and just, that was hard just to walk in and find that. Should I not have said it? What could have, all the coulda, woulda, shouldas really kind of just bother you. So as a caregiver, you have so many different scenarios that you have to run into, and that you learn as you go. Maybe next time I won't do this, maybe this time I'll do that. So children are now having to, I'm looking at which one of my kids is going to take care of me. And they said, don't worry, Mom, we're going to put you in the best nursing home. But caregiving is a big responsibility. You have to be sensitive. and you just have to go with the flow. I don't think there's just a written rule to what you can do. For each person, it's different. And for me, it was, even with all three of them, there were different things that I had to go through, and I have to pivot and readjust.
And you talked about just the mental load on you as a caregiver.
Yes.
I mean, obviously the patient has needs too, but so does you as a caregiver.
Exactly.
Talk about some of the mental load and maybe some signs that people can realize in themselves that, hey, maybe I need to talk to somebody, maybe I need help.
Well, one thing is, when you find yourself, the least little thing bothers you, you snap, no matter what. Someone says something to you, they may not mean it that way, but you perceive it that way, and so you just snap because you don't know what to do. You're lashing out because you realize that you're overwhelmed. It is a big responsibility to be a caregiver. It's not for the faint of heart. And certainly for a family member, because there is no pay, you're doing it out of love and because you are the person that has to do it. I can't imagine having to do that for a company with several different patients. It's just a lot to take care of. And then it really strengthens your faith. If you don't know the Lord, you'll get to have a relationship with Him because you're wondering, how can I do this? It's too much. I was fortunate enough to have a spouse that was very considerate, and that he would help me sometimes, and he'd go over and check on my dad, and I'd say, I can't, it was just too much. And of course Franchetta was dealing with that with her grandmother, then her grandfather, and then her mom. So we kind of strengthened our bond because we kind of became codependent with each other, you know. Not so much complaining, but venting. What do I do? And I just don't know how I'll do this, or I've got to do this. And you know that you've got to do it because there's nobody else to do it.
And Ms. Franchetta, what are some tips that you maybe could give to some caregivers from your own experience too?
Well, first of all, you have to ask for help. And then I think, you know, going back to you've got to take care of yourself so you can take care of them, is make that appointment with your primary care physician so you can make sure that you're at an optimal level to be able to take care of them. And if you're not, what do you need? What clinical support do you need to be able to do that? And also making sure that even if it's not a support system where you're actually in a group, but again, utilizing whoever you have to be part of that support system to help you and not being afraid to ask. Now, there are some small things like, you know, eating right, exercising, and a lot of times you think about when you say eating right, I don't have time, but it means even if you chop up a little lettuce and some carrots and tomatoes, you know, and quickly eat that, or some vegetables, or have some prepared meals, you can do that. Exercising, that helps too. And when people think of that, they're always thinking, does that mean that I've got to go to the gym or I have to have a trainer? I can't do that. No, it just means when you're watching mom or dad, it may mean to just, you know, you're just, you know, taking some steps around, just walking around, breathing, and just, you know, just kind of taking those steps and saying, I got 20 steps in. I went from the bedroom to the living room, and I did that 5 times. Just that type of exercise. And most importantly, just remember to try to have a plan. And it may not be where it's something that you follow totally, but having a plan, okay, this is what I'm going to do today, or I'm going to try to do today. And also, that's your short-term plan. Your long-term plan is, if that person starts to decline in their health, or I decline in my health, what are the things that I already have in place? Anything that you can do that's proactive, or have that jotted down or journaled, where you have that in safekeeping, where if this happens, this is what I'll need to do, is very helpful. I needed that because, again, as Cynthian said, there wasn't that support system as for family to be able to help me with that. So I had to do that myself. Short term, this is what I need to do. Long term, just in case, is what I need to do. And so making sure that those things are very helpful for decreasing your anxiety and making sure that you take care of them as appropriately as you can, but always reaching out, asking for help, and saying, you know, this is a big job. Can you do this small thing for me? Even if it's just go to the dry cleaners, and that's one thing I don't have to do.
Right. every little bit
Every
helps.
little bit.
I know there are some other resources for the community available too, and we're going to talk about those when we get back from the break. You're watching Central Georgia Focus. Well, welcome back to Central Georgia Focus. Today we are talking all about caring for caregivers and the importance of asking for help, and also realizing that you can't do it all. And there are some resources available, a support group too that you all help run.
Right, exactly. We have our caregiver support group that meets every Tuesday, excluding holidays, from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. On our Piedmont campus in Building C. A lot of times we meet in the Cancer Center. If not, we will meet in my office. And that's where we have people coming together, not just in the surrounding areas, but if they find that on Facebook or any other print media about the group, we want them to come in. What I like to do is do an individual session. These are all free to the community, but a lot of times there might be something that you want to share that you're not quite ready yet to share with the group. So we can discuss that, they can vent, they can share, and then when they feel that they're comfortable with coming to the support group, we're there. It's a small group, and people are able to say things that they may feel uncomfortable to say around their family. Just that this feels like an overwhelming burden. I'm tired, but not wanting to share that with the family, but someone that, understands but has an objective view because they're not part of that family system. But also being able to give them information that a lot of times caregivers do not have time to research. They do not know that those resources exist. And we're pretty much the yellow pages in the directory for them, saying, have you thought about this? Everyone has an individual strategy on how they're taking care of their family member. So we get to hear that and say, that's great, but have you thought about doing this? And if you are thinking about doing this, here's the information for that. So we do that. A lot of times people are going to say, I don't have time for that. Well, you can either do it virtually, or you can call me by phone, and we can even talk on the phone about it. When you have the time, even though we're scheduled for Tuesdays at 2 to 3, I understand, being a former caregiver, if you say, I can't meet on Tuesday, but can you meet me on Wednesday, I will do that. So I'm proud to say that that's been a group that's been going on for over 5 years for our community, for caregivers, and soon to be caregivers as well.
And I know too, your support lasts even beyond the caregiving time, when you are reaching that stage of grief after your loved one passes. I just want to briefly be able for y'all to touch on the grief support group as well.
It meets, the grief support group has been in inception for over 21 years. And that meets on Mondays, excluding holidays, from 2:30 to 3:30. Same location. We try to make sure it's familiar. Building C, a lot of times in the Cancer Center classroom, but if it's a smaller group, in my office. We are helping each other. I learned something every Monday from that group. But a lot of times when you've been a caregiver and you've lost that person, you need additional resources. And so that's good.
When they know somebody else has been through the same thing, that you're not alone, because a lot of times you feel like you're an island and nobody understands. But it takes a big person to make that step to come to the support group, because for so long it's been a stigma. You got to go to help. You mean you go into counseling? But it helps, and they become a group unit. Right. And this is our resident thanatologist here, Dr. Trawick.
Well, I thank you so much for doing this. I know we have so much important things. Thank you for joining us for Central Georgia Focus, and thank you, ladies, for all the work that you do.
Thank you for having me.